This is the part on YouTube when people are like, why didn't they edit this out where they're talking about, are we on? Are we recording? Are you recording? I'm recording. Are you recording? And that goes on for 10 minutes.
Yeah, it's nice to see you.
Good to see
It's
you
nice
too.
to see
Yeah.
you.
Good to
Mm,
see you.
mm.
I know you from your YouTube videos. So it's a small group. People making videos about Zen on YouTube. So I'm glad to finally meet you.
Yeah, you're one of the few YouTubers I'm following.
Oh,
The
good.
other one is Brad in the English-speaking Zen sphere. And yeah, you're
That's
one of
right.
the few
You
guys I
speak
follow.
Japanese, right?
A little
Okay.
bit, yes.
So then are there Japanese monk YouTubers?
There are, but I don't really follow any of them.
Okay.
I don't really follow any of them, but there's a number of young Japanese monks who try to reach out on the internet as well. Some do YouTube, some do TikTok.
Ah.
Um,
I know of those monks because yeah, it'll show up in my feed. There'll be some guy rapping the Heart Sutra from
yeah, yeah,
the
yeah.
Ocean
There's the
Gate or
Heart
something.
Sutra guy. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, thank you. Next.
Yeah, about 4 or 5 years ago, I did an interview with Brad and I asked him a list of 10 questions.
Mhm.
So if you like, I would ask you those, or I would like to ask you those 10 questions. Somebody asked them to me about a decade ago and it became a German YouTube documentary. I found it quite interesting.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
if
yeah.
you like me,
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I've been thinking about your questions. And
oh, you already prepared.
no, I didn't prepare. The more I think about them, the more they unravel in my head. I'm left with nothing now. So go ahead. Let's sit in silence for an hour.
Yeah, the first one is who are you?
Who are you? It sounds like a koan. I'm a guy from Wisconsin, and I eventually wound up at a Zen Buddhist monastery in the mountains of Los Angeles, studying with the Rinzai Zen master Joshu Sasaki Roshi.
Mm,
And I did that for 10 years. I lived there for 10 years. Then I moved to our head temple in LA, and I was the one of the monks there for 3 more years. So Zen-wise, that's my CV. So I was a full-time monk, and now I'm a lay Zen Osho or priest. So in our lineage,
yes.
you're like a student, and then you're an unsui, which is, you take Tokoro Shiki and you shave your head and get your robes, and then you go through all the officer positions at the monastery, and
Yes.
then you become an Osho, which is a priest, and then generally you go out on your own after that. So that's where I'm at now, on my own.
And you're living in Vienna right now?
I am, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
By a strange series of events. Yeah, I came out here to visit a friend of mine
Yeah.
who is a monk, and he's teaching out here. And he kind of got roped into it a little bit. He came to visit a leader of a Zen community out here who was in our community, and he was dying. This leader of the Zen community. My friend was just kind of coming to give him moral support, and like 2 years later, he was living here, taking over his community. And then I came to visit him, and now I'm living here because he introduced me to a nice woman who's now my girlfriend. So I stayed.
Is the community the Bodhidharma
Yeah,
Zendo?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I see. But you're not connected to the Bodhidharma Zendo, so you're not visiting there regularly or teaching
I
there.
I go there. I have in the past led retreats. I haven't been in a while. COVID got me kind of out of the habit of practicing formally, and then I kind of liked not putting on my robes and not practicing formally, practicing on my own. I'm not sure if that's just an excuse for laziness an antisocial streak, but I am so I am involved with them. I'm still very good friends with the head teacher there. And I'm actually going to be doing one of their zazen kais in June. So they've got a big zazen kai there. So I'll be doing that.
I see. I see.
Yeah,
Your YouTube channel is called Zen Confidential, which I think is also the title of your first book.
that's right. Yeah.
And you wrote it as Jack Shozan Haubner.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I introduce myself as Muho, and then people ask me, "What's your real name?" And I
You're
say
right.
Olaf. But my wife calls me Muho. My father in Germany calls me Muho. So I'm
Oh,
sometimes kind of wondered, why does anybody want to hear my real name? Isn't Muho enough?
right, right.
What surprises me in your case, you have Jack, you have Shozan, you have Haubner, but you also have a real Dharma name and a real name,
Yeah.
so to
I mean,
speak. Why do you have so many names?
what happened was I've always been a writer. I went
Yeah,
to the monastery and I gave up writing for like 6 months, but then my mom got me this for Christmas, this really beautiful journal, and I started take trying to honor its physical beauty with some non-ridiculous, somewhat perceptive insights about my practice, right? And then eventually
yeah.
turned those into an essay about composting toilets of all things, which we had at the Mount Baldy Zen
Mm,
Center.
mm, mm.
Um, and I published that under my name, Steve Krieger, um,
Yeah,
which is my, Christian name. Then I
yeah,
got ordained, and it was not, I talked to my mentor back then about this, and I wanted to keep writing, but it really wasn't appropriate to be writing and publishing as a monk. So there's this plausible deniability of getting a pseudonym and writing under the pseudonym. So it's kind of that thing. If you're going to do something against the rules, just don't get caught and don't make it a problem for other people. Of course, my writing
yeah,
did
yeah,
become a problem for other people and myself, but it was a way of kind of protecting the community wherein I was writing. And a lot
yeah.
of people get mad at me. They're like, your writing is all about yourself. It's so narcissistic. And I'm like, well, I didn't write about other people. They would get very angry if I wrote about them. So yeah, that's where and then it just became the name that my books were associated with. And so I just like in a situation, I always feel a little bit weird by,
Mm,
I mean,
mm,
my girlfriend calls me Jack. So that's what I
mm.
usually go by in situations
I
like,
see, I see.
yeah, but I have lots of different names in different settings. It's kind of strange, but it's kind of a good teaching too. It's like, oh, what is this name implying I am in this moment? I can take some pointers and manifest accordingly.
Interesting,
You know,
interesting. The second question is, what is enlightenment? What is
oh
awakening?
God, yeah, enlightenment, man. Yeah, I got every time I've been holding this question the last few weeks since you sent it to me. I mean, and I don't want to be sarcastic or
Yeah.
evasive, I
Mm,
also don't want to do that thing that like secular minded Zen Buddhists do, which is kind of sideline ideas and concepts. That being said, I mean, we never talked in I don't remember my teacher ever explicitly using that term.
mm,
Probably did, but it certainly wasn't part of our vocabulary.
mm,
Um,
mm, mm, mm.
I have one specific memory of a senior priest telling me there's no such thing as an enlightened being. There's
Yeah.
only enlightened behavior, which I later found
Mm,
out he stole from Shunryu Suzuki. But at the time, I was very impressed with that definition. There's only enlightened activity because, of course,
mm,
when that's manifesting, there's not this ego, right?
mm,
Like
mm,
the
mm,
I mean, it's funny. So I'm a lay practitioner now.
mm,
I'm a dude in the world,
mm,
and
mm,
I find having done all that sitting for all those years, all that endless sitting. God, the sitting you do at a monastery, just all you do is sit. And when you're
mm,
not sitting, you're doing work practice, samu. When you're not doing samu, you're doing chanting practice or eating practice,
mm.
formal meals, or you're doing call. Everything is practice, right? So it's
Yeah.
great training for Buddhism, believe it or not.
Mm, mm,
So then when I get out into the world and I'm sitting on the bus, I notice oftentimes there's an ego waiting for me. It's
mm,
it's
mm,
the person that's ignoring what's going on the bus, almost sometimes trying not just subconsciously trying not to breathe in so I don't catch somebody's virus, judging the kid who's playing TikTok, looking at my own phone, generally being uncomfortable because I'm on a bus. That's not enlightened. The enlightened behavior in that moment, the enlightened activity is to sit. Usually for me, it's sitting down,
mm,
manifesting the activity that I'm doing completely, doing something completely so that the ego isn't spinning its
mm,
wheels in my head. Um,
mm,
so
mm,
I don't think of enlightenment as some big aha moment. I mean,
mm,
sometimes
mm,
we
mm,
have those in these practices, and you hear about those in the texts because that's
mm,
when someone really gets it. Oh, that way I have of looking at the world through the scrim of ego is wrong. It's limited,
mm,
it's provincial, it's selfish, it's brute, it's animal, it's uninteresting, and it's causes suffering, you know. And there's another way, but um, I more and more I've tried to just not tried to, but I've dropped my my um not fantasies, not illusions, but just I don't know. I don't know what you would call it. Probably fantasies and illusions about how you can have a satori that's going to clear up your suffering just in one fell swoop.
mm,
But
mm, mm,
moment after moment, you have to commit to your life as it is in that moment. And no satori from the past will allow you to
mm,
manifest no ego in the next moment, in my experience.
mm, mm. You said the Roshi didn't use expressions like enlightenment. Does that also apply to Kensho?
Yeah, he didn't.
Or
He told me once, he told me in my, I
mm,
remember this because it's the only time I think he ever said something like this. Like he told me in my, when I got ordained, he
mm,
said, Kensho means you see the other as yourself. I remember that.
mm,
I've never forgotten that. And it really hit me in that moment. You see the other as yourself. I
mm,
see.
mm,
And I think he probably used that term slightly more often, but he didn't use that term either, to my
mm,
memory.
mm, mm,
Yeah.
mm. Because most of my life I practiced Soto, but
Hmm.
I got into Zen and I read the three pillars of Zen by Kapleau, and it's all about Satori and Kensho. And
Yeah.
I read D.T. Suzuki, and Satori is this big X. You can't express it in words, but if you don't have Satori, no amount of sitting uh,
Huh.
counts.
Yeah, that's a
Uh,
dangerous concept.
so I always had it in the back of my mind. Even then, when I got into Soto and I heard Sawaki Roshi Zazen is good for nothing, and I found that sounds cool as well. But I had it in the back of my mind, and for 1 year, about 25 years ago, I practiced in a Rinzai temple in Kyoto, Tofukuji. The
Oh yeah, yeah,
Roshi at the
yeah.
time, Fukushima was the Roshi. He
Yeah.
visited the US a couple of times.
Yeah.
Although I had the feeling he didn't write like your teacher so much. So
Yeah.
he visited Pomona and the LA region, but
Yeah, yeah,
for
yeah.
some reason,
Yeah. His paths crossed with Mount Baldy people's paths at one point.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
The people came to the talks, but I had this idea. Now I'm going to do Doksan, I'm going to do the koans. But I was surprised. Nobody talks about Kensho. So I was looking at these 10 monks and was wondering how many of them
Yeah,
had
yeah,
Kensho and
yeah.
how big is the Kensho
Yeah,
kind of.
yeah. There's a lot of
But
that.
nobody. I stayed there for 1 year and Kensho wasn't even mentioned once or
Yeah.
Satori.
I remember I was at there's this great Roshi. We at one point a few of us from Mount Baldy were traveling around Japan. We just was like we were doing the grand tour of all the different Rinzai mana. And I remember there was
Mm,
this one really great Roshi who has like a city temple that's a lot, which is rare. And we had some event and there were a lot of his students there. And one of them was asking me, "Oh, have you had Kensho? Have you had Kensho?" I was trying to like figure out how to answer him. And the less I said, the more he was like, "Oh, you've had Kensho. You've had a deep Kensho." And he just kept projecting all this. So I never said anything. And to him, I was the most enlightened American he had ever met. So, it's usually people outside of the monasteries that are talking about that. But I know what you mean. There is that thing in the Kapleau tradition. Now, I'm not that familiar with the Kapleau tradition just by
mm, mm.
glancing associations with people who've practiced in it. But there is more of that thing of you better have the opening, a big opening, or your sitting is in vain. Um,
Yeah.
and you do get that in a lot of the older, like the DT Suzuki stuff and
Mm. Yes. Yeah.
and I think there's some truth to it in the sense of at least I know in the Rinzai lineage, there is, in my experience, a emphasis on like don't. a rolling stone gathers no moss. So like
mm, mm.
make your sitting active, and you
Yeah,
will have
yeah.
to take that sitting into this interaction with your teacher and then manifest it. And
Mm,
it's
mm,
somewhere in between like a completely spontaneous um, manifestation and you're learning a language. Koan practice is almost a kind of a language. It's a way of expressing it, it's a way.
mm,
So that, it's not you go into it and you feel like you're gonna have the top of your head is going to explode and the satori is going to come flying out and it's this completely
mm,
unnatural experience. But
mm,
as I was taught, it is kind of a language. It's a way of expressing things. It's a you get the hang of it.
mm,
So it's
mm,
yeah, and it's nothing other than what's happening in zazen
mm, mm,
but in my experience, it's just a more refined and more direct version.
mm,
And it's kind of a test. And it's also a pretext to interact with the teacher. And I think that's ultimately what it was. It's a pretext for one-on-one interaction with the teacher. Sounds and koan practice. Because if you don't do
mm.
that, a lot of us, we just sit there and we drift and drift and drift on our cushions. So yeah. But like I said, you read DT Suzuki and you're like, wow, I better have this really special and amazing experience, or else it's all a waste of time, which I don't think is correct.
Mm, mm, mm. The third question, you already said quite something about it, but the third question is, what is the qualification of enlightenment?
Enlightenment, I don't know. Not being coming from a place of that self-referential ego, I think.
Mm,
Like I think
mm,
I find
mm,
for myself there are times when I'm just stuck in my own garbage, my own fears, my own uh familiar way of seeing the world because it's comfortable and it's familiar. And it feeds my ambitions and my fears. And I think if when I come at the world from that perspective, and it happens, it's
mm,
like it's automatic. Then I think it's impossible to actually experience the moment as it is in that moment after moment. So, and you meet people like that. Like we would get people who would come to the temple when I was in Los Angeles, and they would want to learn Zazen
mm,
meditation. I mean, I remember this guy coming in. We were near the airport, or not near it, but close-ish to it. And he was like an Uber driver, and he just like came in off the streets because he was parked on the side of the street where all the prostitutes and all the drug addicts would hang out was this one side of the street because that was when that area, which is now a very ritzy area, West Adams, that area back then was a shady area. So he was like parking there, just kind of like getting his head as an Uber driver, and he saw this Zen center, and so he came in and he wanted to learn meditation. So I was trying to teach it to him, um, but he was so caught up in where he had just been and where he was going that Zazen instruction was not going to take in that moment. And he theoretically could have done Zazen, but he was very caught up in his amygdala, I guess, and his cortisol in his brain, and having to do his job and worrying about money and worrying about the app going off and that sort of thing. So if you're stuck in those spaces, if you're not willing to, if you're not willing or can't drop all that, you can't have these openings, or the fancy term is enlightenment experiences,
mm, mm,
in my
mm.
experience. What do you
How
think?
would you how would you define the ego?
Oh, God. I don't know. For me, I think it's kind of like living in the past or projecting into the future. So trying to game reality instead of meeting the moment as it is in that moment and making relationship. My teacher used to call it making relationship. Um,
Mm,
and when I would do koan practice, he would just we would engage in some very simple kind of conversation, a back
mm,
and a forth,
mm, mm,
or he would like shake my hand or just give me a hug or something. So he was teaching me, I felt, how to make relationship without thinking, without judging or without being afraid, without being, he would call it conquering mentality, without conquering mentality or without defensive mentality, but making complete relationship.
mm, mm,
And
mm.
ego is like that self that comes in between
Yeah. Mm,
thinking mind, really. Thinking mind and then believing it. That's
mm,
ego, I think, in a
mm,
nutshell. Because it's amazing how much I think. I'm not alone in that, I'm sure. Like, and that's ego, probably. And
mm,
then just seeing the world like through these little words and not making complete relationship. And my teacher would teach when you make complete relationship in something as simple as shaking his hand, you die into that activity. Like you're not thinking, you're doing this thing. And then you can feel the person instead of thinking about how weird it is that you're touching someone or waiting to pull away or wanting more from them or blah, 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 right?
mm,
Actual connection. Yeah. And that's
mm,
really important. That's been really important for me because those connection moments are, there's a renewal after that or a rebirth after
mm,
that. I'm like, you know, escaping suffering or not escaping, but not suffering in those moments. So ego is that
mm,
suffering. Anyways, what do you think?
mm. What do I think? Well, I was asking the question because I sometimes wonder how I can explain the difference between the egoless state we're talking about and the state of depersonalization or derealization, where somebody has completely lost the sense of self, but for them it's not a liberation, but
Oh, interesting.
it's a form of psychosis.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah. It's like a ghost-like state and not a no self state. I mean, I was always taught when you lose yourself, then it's reborn in the next moment and it feels good. I mean, usually that's what happens, right?
yeah.
You come back, but what you're talking about is different with depersonalization. Yeah. So what is your response when you try to explain that?
Well, I usually say that, well, we're often tempted to talk about the ego as like kind of the enemy, and you need to destroy that. And I think that's a mistaken view. I mean, the moment you say, I need to destroy my ego, that's already the ego talking there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
need to destroy this.
yeah.
Um, so I think it's more about building up a healthy relationship with the ego. You shouldn't be, how do you say, a slave to the ego. So the ego shouldn't be in the center, but also like you mentioned, thinking mind, and we shouldn't be, how do you say, always controlled by like thinking mind. But without thinking mind, I mean, how are we supposed to live our lives? So,
Yeah.
um, of course, ego in the sense that I identify with only that. For example, using the metaphor of the stage, I identify only with this one actor, Muho. That's Muho, and the whole story is about Muho. And as long as Muho uh, wins, that's okay. I mean, that's ego, and that's problematic.
Right.
So seeing yourself in the other, in other words, you could say you become the stage for all the actors. You allow all the actors to play their game
Mhm.
on the stage. That's maybe something that
Mm.
I would say, like becoming, well, the whole stage for
Yeah,
the
yeah,
actors. Or
yeah.
I usually use the metaphor of sheep on the meadow, and usually at the beginning of the practice, we try to play the shepherd and control the sheep and divide
Yeah.
the white from
That's a good point. Yeah.
the black ones.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
And at some point we learn to take a kind of step back and become the sky and just allow
Mm.
the sheep to play their game. And I say basically
Yeah.
finally it's not about being the sky but becoming the meadow itself. You allow the sheep to trample on you.
Hey, that's pretty good. I like
uh,
that.
um, And well, ego in this metaphor would be the shepherd that
Yeah,
also
yeah,
wants to
yeah.
control. And you don't have to kill the shepherd, you don't have to eliminate the shepherd. You also allow the shepherd to play his game, but
Right.
you are the meadow
Yeah.
for the sheep and the shepherd, for all of them.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. I mean, when I was a monk, I mean, I was a young monk, but so you learn these things the hard way. But like so much of my practice was being the shepherd, I think, without knowing it, like just being uncomfortable with discomfort,
Yeah.
uncomfortable states of mind, so much suffering around like guilt and a sense of failure that I was failing
Mm,
in that moment to manifest an enlightened state, and I think it's maybe something you pick up, and also maybe just something you get better with age. Like there's some
mm, mm,
desire to control the world in your own life, maybe that loses its heat as you get older. I mean, yeah, and I think about when I sit now, it's really just being there in the moment with what comes up, and not necessarily trying to repress it or indulge it, but just be it.
mm,
You know?
mm,
Yeah, it's
mm,
interesting. We were all very ambitious up at the monastery. It's the only way you can get through a place like that. But there's a downside to that because you can be in a state of agitation when you're sitting,
mm, mm,
which isn't sitting.
mm,
It's
mm.
fighting sitting.
Question number 4 is, what is the role of zazen and how do you practice it? In Soto, it's all about just sitting. That's the
Mhm.
center of practice. But
Yeah.
how about Rinzai?
Yeah, I like that. I've had some people come at me since I left the monastery and kind of challenge the way I talk about meditation. So I like that Soto approach, that just sitting, and I think it's sophisticated and it's also humble, um, and and sometimes I find myself doing that,
Mm,
just sitting. Other
mm,
times I find I am uh, drifting,
mm,
and
mm.
and I need to do this a certain kind of focus, and I think maybe that focus came from koan practice,
Yeah.
but it
Mm,
is gathering like it's a different kind of experience. It is focusing completely, like complete focus
mm,
into the breath. It usually just happens kind of in one moment into the breath, and I've been trying to do that more and more lately. Um, so when they talk about the burning molten ball of lead in the mukoan, and it's
mm, mm,
your
mm,
esophagus, maybe you can't swallow it down, but you can't vomit it out. So there can
mm,
be that feeling when one really, really, really focuses. And it doesn't happen for long. Usually what happens is you dissolve into the mu,
mm,
if
mm,
you will.
mm,
And then you come out the other side. Usually it's a moment later or whatever, and then you repeat that activity. So I have found that to be helpful because it's proactive and
mm,
it
mm,
doesn't
mm,
put me
mm,
at the mercy of whatever my perseverating, overthinking brain is doing in the moment,
mm,
or whatever ghosts of the day I've brought with me to the cushion. Like now they're going to
mm,
catch up with me. Conversation I had, or something that went wrong or something that went right. I can find sometimes, okay, I just sat here for 25 minutes and just kind of chewed that cud. So sometimes I do just sit, and
mm,
usually it's a
mm,
combination of both, really focusing and then just sitting with whatever is going on. And what I was taught really at the monastery was, okay, there's zazen, and that's one type of practice. But then when you leave that and you do walking meditation, you're doing the same kind of activity, but you're just walking. So you're walking with complete attention and care put into each step. Or when you're raking, it's the case there. Eating, you're doing your formal meal with that same kind of activity. So Zazen is sitting Zen, but then there's walking Zen, there's talking Zen, there's probably emailing Zen, there's probably podcast Zen. Yeah.
How much or how important would you say is the posture in Zazen?
Oh, pretty important. I mean,
Pretty important.
Yeah, it's I don't know. Is there zazen without posture? I mean, whenever I'm practicing, yeah, whenever I find myself drifting, like if I'm on the bus, for example, and I find I'm being egoic, thinking stupid things, the first thing I will do is straighten my posture. That is the very first thing that I'll do. And
Mm,
feel whatever I'm sitting down on, or feel the ground beneath my feet, or feel the table in my hands. So yeah, posture is important. I think it was Shoto Harada Roshi who's saying that your mind goes where the your mind follows where the body goes. And his example was,
mm, mm,
I'm in this room talking to you right now. If I leave this room, I'm in the hallway. Now my mind is out there, right? So yeah, and a lot of times I find myself in this with regards to Zazen, just take the posture over and over and over, and Zazen will appear or not. And I think this
mm,
is more of a Soto way of doing it.
mm,
Take the
mm,
posture, and Zazen will appear like a flag waiting for the wind. Zazen
mm.
is not your responsibility. Your responsibility is just to position yourself and take the
Yeah.
posture. Be
Mm,
humble about it. So very important. It's almost if not everything.
mm, mm, mm. The next question is, who is a teacher and what's the role of a teacher? And how do you recognize a
Ooh,
true teacher?
I don't know. That's a good one. I mean, that's a good one. Gosh. I mean, teachers, it's in my life, they've appeared. I mean, it's cheesy. They say, when you're ready, the teacher will appear. And that has kind of been the case. Like,
Mm,
it's
mm,
sort of like meeting a partner in your love life. I mean,
mm, mm, mm,
and I
mm,
think it's hard to meet a really great teacher for you if you're not in a place where you're ready for it. I mean, I remember before I met my mentor in Zen Buddhism, I remember having a moment where I where I threw it out into the universe that I would like some help. I remember specifically the day that it happened. And
mm,
it wasn't, although I've had many desperate moments, this wasn't one of them. This was more of a understanding that I needed this, that this
mm,
thing,
mm,
whatever this was that was going on, could use a spiritual teacher. So I threw that out there, and then at some point after that, I met my mentor. So I think, and I had already done a bunch of Buddhism up to that point, but then he really manifested as a wise person in front of me, which I hadn't seen before. Mostly I had just seen people who understood on an intellectual Buddhism and knew how to put it into practice and could speak excitedly and intelligently from their own experience. But he had been through the ringer at 10 years at Mount Baldy as a monk, and he'd passed and failed koans and spent many mornings at 3 o'clock shoveling, before retreat, shoveling snow. And it had shaped him, molded him in a certain way, or carved out his character in a certain way. It was different to me. So I would bring him my questions, and he would take care of them. Usually
mm,
just silencing my mind. He had good answers, but usually it was just silencing my mind and getting me to have that awe of a really good answer that I was looking for in all 4 years of Western philosophy in college. I never had that experience once. I did not have it once. 4 years. How many tens of thousands of dollars? How much, you know, effort went into that education? Never was there any wisdom, but I would hang out with this friend of mine drinking coffee or even a margarita or something, and I would bring him a really big problem, and he would
mm, mm,
speak to it, really speak to it, you know? So for me, a teacher can do that. And then when I worked with my teacher, Sasaki Roshi, you know, he was a real, I don't know, in many ways. In other ways, no, but in many ways, he was just kind of a example of the lineage, like a Buddha or a Zen master. He was a Zen master. And so you see it in action. And then, oh,
mm.
it's like, okay, this is a way to be. So a teacher for me has shown me a way to be other than the provincial mindset that I've sort of grown through my own experience and the one that society keeps handing me or trying to hand me, parents, teachers.
Mm, mm, mm.
Are you a teacher? So are you the abbot of a center, or are you leading sitting, or are you a teacher?
Well, I joined Antaiji formally as a monk in 1993, and I trained as an unsui for 8 years, and then I received Dharma transmission, and my original plan was to go back to Germany eventually and start some small Zen center. But as you probably know, there's lots of Zen centers in Europe, in America, no formal training monasteries, or maybe like Mount Baldy or Tassajara, but not kind of Japanese style
Right.
temples. And in Japan, it's kind of the other way around. There's lots of temples, there's formal training monasteries, but you don't have Zen centers in the cities where lay people would come to practice.
Okay.
So my idea was before I go back to Germany, I start a small group somewhere in Tokyo or Osaka. And that's what I did 25 years ago. But rents were expensive and there were lots of homeless people living in the park. So I decided I'll also live in the park. I'll live in a tent and I will have my Zen group every morning outside.
Hmm.
And I enjoyed that quite a lot. So there were not many people coming, but I discovered the internet. It was 2001, and there were internet cafes around. So I started a website, and I invited people
Wow.
to join me.
So wait, you were
And people
living
started
you were living in your a tent?
in a tent, yeah.
Wow, interesting. And you didn't really
So
speak Japanese.
oh, I did.
You did,
I
okay.
had studied Japanese at university. So the first time I learned about Bodhidharma Zen was in 1990. I had studied Japanese and I had translated for Sasaki Joshu
Oh,
Roshi
that's
twice
right. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
in
yeah,
the summer.
yeah. Yeah, at Shibes.
At Shibes, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And we also went to Vienna at the time. Leonard Cohen was his Inji the
Yeah.
second time he came. So I had the honor to meet him as well. So I spoke a reasonable amount of Japanese before I went to Japan, and then in 2001, my Japanese was as my English, or maybe even a little bit better than my English. It was good enough to communicate. I
Okay.
could read the newspaper and stuff. I could write stuff in Japanese. So my idea was I lived in the park maybe 3, 4, 5 years. I enjoyed the life there. I met my future wife there.
Oh,
But 6 months later, my teacher died in an accident while shoveling snow. And I was his fifth and last Dharma heir. The others were Japanese, and I thought, well, one of them would take over the job.
mm,
But it seemed that nobody was so interested. And also, well, the teacher of my teacher, who was still alive at the time, for some reason, he had the idea Muho has to do the job. So I found myself in that situation that, of course, could have said no, but
yeah.
if my teacher's teacher says he has to do it, I'm gonna try. So I proposed to my girlfriend at the time. We knew each other only for 6 weeks, but then she came with me. And I was the abbot of Antaiji for 18 years,
Oh, wow.
almost 2 decades. And I resigned 5 years ago, 6 years ago. So now one of my students, a Japanese nun, is the new abbess, and she's taking care of Antaiji, and I'm living with my wife. I got three children. We are living here in Osaka now.
Oh, wow. Okay. So you were at Antaiji, and they have both nuns and monks training there, both men and women.
Yes, yeah, it's mixed. Yeah,
Okay.
it's mixed. So it's unusual in that way.
And do you guys, yeah, exactly. Do you guys do sessions? Like, is your job to like take a boy or a girl who's going to inherit their dad's, or I guess their mom's temple,
Hmm.
and then train them for 3, 4, 5 years, and then they take over the temple? Because that was my sense. That's how it was in the Rinzai monasteries in Japan.
That's how it's usually is also in Soto, but in Antaiji we don't do that. I mean, we do session every month.
Okay.
We basically practice the traditional Sodo style, but even after a decade, you don't have the license. So if you want to get the license to take over a temple, you have to go for at least 1 or 2 years in one of those recognized
Okay, okay,
Emmon dojos, special dojos.
okay.
So there are almost never we almost never get people that were born in a temple. It's usually lay people, half of them from Japan and the other half from America and Europe.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, so how have I heard about anti-G? It might have just been through you, but what's the how I because that's in my head. So that wasn't the Eat, Sleep, Sit book, was it?
No, that's Eheji.
That's AHG. Yeah,
But probably you heard about Sawaki Kodo. Also, Brad mentions him from
yeah.
time to
That's who it
time.
is. That's who it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, and that's
He
like
was, yeah.
sorry. So
Uchiyama Roshi is another famous name.
yeah, okay, okay, that's where I got it from. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And Shohaku Okumura, who's in
Right.
Indiana, Bloomington, he's also from Antaiji.
Okay, and it's interesting. So you guys are just training people who want to learn Zen, not necessarily
Exactly.
people who have a responsibility to take over their parents' temple.
Exactly.
Because there's a lot
Yeah.
of that in Rinzai in Japan, a dispiriting amount of that in my personal experience. But I don't want to impugn my own lineage, so I'll stop there. But it seems like there was a lot of just the really strict formal training and the sitting in the koan practice were kids getting ready to take over daddy's temple and not what you're talking about.
Mm,
People
mm.
committed to the
Yeah, I
craft.
mean, this one year in Tofukuji, it was exactly like you said, like there were 11. And apart from myself, they were all supposed to take over their father's temple. And they were looking at me, are you crazy? I
Right,
mean, you can spend 3 years here, 5 years here, but there's no temple in
right,
Germany
right,
that you
right,
can take over.
right,
Why are you so stupid? How
right,
can you be so stupid to kind
right,
of
right, right, right,
torment
right.
yourself and you don't get anything?
Right.
Uh,
Yeah. Yeah. That is sometimes the attitude you run into over there. I experienced. Yeah. Like, what are you crazy? It's like, yeah.
Yeah. The next question is, how can we as human beings overcome suffering?
Oh boy. Um, hmm. Well, I was
That's
taught that suffering comes from the ego, and ego comes from overthinking and being attached to yourself. And my teacher
mm,
would call it standing unconditionally on the I am self. So
mm,
in my experience, usually it's coming out of myself and into whatever
mm,
situation I'm in. And that usually means dropping, if I can, my preconceptions and connecting to what's happening in the moment as it's happening and not fighting it. I mean, usually for me, suffering is fighting
mm,
something, you know?
mm,
So that's usually being in the past. Like, no, no, this is
mm,
not supposed to be
mm,
like this. It's supposed to be like it was 20 minutes ago. Or projecting into the future. No, no, no. This is not the where I was heading this moment. I was heading towards this beautiful, perfect life, this perfect moment, instead of being there in the moment. I mean, it's not always
mm,
comfortable. Like, I think there's some like I find for myself, like you have to be brave. That's why I like the Rinzai samurai spirit. You have to be brave because there's some sense of you have to be willing to be extremely uncomfortable sometimes and even in pain
mm,
in order to avoid suffering. Because
mm,
sometimes life and the moment
mm,
just brings you pain and brings you discomfort, and you got to be in that or you're going to suffer, I find,
mm,
you
mm,
know.
mm. The next question is, what does it mean to transcend the ego? But basically, you already answered that, I would say.
Oh, okay. I always, yeah, it's funny because I use that
Or do you have
term.
anything to add
Well, I
to
was
that?
thinking, as I was laying here earlier, I was thinking about when I was, because I use that term too, and my teacher used to use that term. But the more I think about it, the more I think it isn't transcended. It's almost like you duck
Mm,
under it, like you lay down flat on the earth, and the ego
mm,
goes right
mm,
over your
mm.
head because
Yeah,
touching
yeah,
the
yeah,
earth is how you
yeah.
transcend. Yeah,
Mm, mm, mm. Yeah.
down in the ground.
Um, Question number 8. What is the role of devotion in Zen Buddhism?
Yeah, that's a good one, right? I mean, I was very devoted to my teacher.
Mm,
And
mm,
for good,
mm,
better or worse, especially in the end when he was dying.
yeah.
For
Mm,
it was a long haul and he wasn't
mm,
sick, but he was losing his life, as another way would
mm,
put it, like physically, he would be able to do less.
mm,
And he
mm,
was able to put his mind out into complex responsibilities less as he got older. Um, so I was very devoted to being with him and to taking care of him. I was totally committed. I think devotion is important because it
mm,
involves sincerity, and sincerity means bringing yourself fully to the practice, I guess, or the teachings or your responsibilities. And if you don't do that, there's your what we used to call a hopeless case at Mount Baldy. Like my
mm,
mentor used to tell me, you need three things for Zen practice. You need to have half a brain. So you can't be a total idiot. You got to have at least
mm,
half a brain. You got to be sincere and you got to be desperate. And sincerity and desperation comes with devotion. Like you're willing to give yourself without irony or without
mm,
without stepping back and judging, you know. You're willing to be completely present.
mm,
That's my experience. And
mm,
without yeah, and devotion is, I think, part of that. It's kind of doing it
mm,
with love and care, you know.
mm, 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 mm.
But what do you specifically mean by devotion? Like, what's your answer to that question?
I don't know if it's exactly the same. When I hear devotion in English, in German, for me, it would be Hingabe. And, well, to give yourself
Hmm.
to a person or to the moment, to life, to
Yeah,
give yourself. So we often talk about letting go, and a lot of people kind of misunderstand this as you throw something away that you don't want. So I usually say letting go and accepting are two sides of the same coin. To
that's
let
nice.
go of
Yeah.
yourself means to accept yourself. To let go of life means to accept life. And kind of where they meet, that's devotion.
Oh, it's nice.
It's both,
I should be
that is
asking
both.
you these questions. You got good answers. Sorry, go ahead. Keep talking. Letting
So
go
yeah, I think.
and accepting that point is
Mm,
devotion, you're saying.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. That's beautiful.
yeah. Mm, mm, mm. What you said about the half a brain, sincerity, and despair,
A desperation.
desperation. Despair and desperation is different.
I mean, desperate. Yeah, I guess it is. This desperation is you're desperate in the sense of you're willing, you're at your last leg. Like you're out, you're at the end of the road, and this is
Yeah.
what you're going to have to do now, or there's nothing else. That's
Mm.
desperation. You have to do it. And it comes
And
from,
there's more kind of it's a proactive thing, while despair is more kind of static.
yeah, despair would be a kind of
Mm.
ennui on steroids. And
Oh,
desperation is I have to do something or else,
yeah. Mm, mm, mm.
I guess. I don't know.
I found it interesting because in Hakuin you have the great doubt, great trust, or great belief, and great effort. And
Right.
desperation and the great doubt are probably connected.
Yeah.
Sincerity and maybe the trust or belief, and
Yeah.
then half a brain and the effort. I don't know.
Maybe. Yeah, 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 yeah. Or maybe we just got so many dumb people at our monastery. He needed to make that clear. Everybody, don't come if you don't have half a brain, but not a full brain, because we would get those people too. The people that solved
Not too much.
everything.
Not too
Yeah,
much.
not too much. Little bit stupid. Okay. It's not
Yeah.
too much. Yeah.
Mm, mm,
Yeah.
mm. What was the next question? How do you practice Zen in daily life?
That's a good one.
Mm,
Oh gosh. Yeah, where else can I practice it these days?
mm,
Because even my zazen practice, when I do it, which isn't enough, is in my daily life. Um, it's so simple for me. It's I'm in my head and I'm
mm,
thinking about where I have just been and where I have to go,
mm,
and
mm,
then committing to where I am. It can
mm,
be
mm,
boiling water. Sometimes it's just don't go check your phone. Don't look up and try and prepare yourself for the work task you have to do. Like, be with the, and it's a settling into my body and into the moment. You do that. I try to do that over and over and over. Yeah. And we wake up sometimes in our daily life and we know to do that. And then
mm,
very often, other times, one is just caught up in responsibilities and caught up in thinking, basically. So, not being
mm,
caught up in thinking. And those
mm,
moments come, those openings where you're awake, and then you have to put them into practice. That's basically what I learned at the monastery.
mm, mm, mm,
And then you get lost again in the moment and you have fun suffering and being joyful. And then you later on, you wake up again and you realize and you put that awakening into practice, doing what you're doing in that moment. That's what I was
mm,
taught.
mm, mm, mm,
Very simple. God, my teacher used to say Zen has few moving parts, and that's was so helpful because you can't bring it into your crowded daily life if it's a busy practice too. So it's very simple.
mm, 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 mm.
Oftentimes it's just being in the moment, just or
Yeah, yeah.
being in my body and just being
Mm,
in my
mm,
body. And to be in my body, I have to be with the thing that my body's with, like the boiling water,
mm,
right? And then there you are, practice.
mm,
Zen.
mm. When you meet a person that's looking for the way, what would your short advice be to that person?
I don't know, probably everything we've just been talking about, but yeah, it
Mm,
depends, I mean, it depends where they're at,
mm,
right?
mm, mm,
Boy, that's a
mm,
tough one because they're going to be
mm,
coming from a certain context and you got to meet
mm,
them where
mm,
they're coming from.
mm, 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 mm,
Depends where they're coming from.
mm,
I
mm,
find it really hard to give advice the older I get, you know,
mm.
because it's hard. It's hard to meet people exactly where they're at, you know,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
it's really hard. Uh, yeah, so usually usually I just listen and then somehow they'll say something to
Mm,
themselves
mm, mm,
that's
mm,
helpful
mm,
to them. Yeah,
mm,
that's my
mm,
experience. Yeah.
mm, mm, mm,
Yeah, you ask
mm,
people enough questions and they'll get what they want. And then if they keep going, then maybe something else, zazen
mm, mm,
instruction or stuff that I found to be helpful when I was asking similar questions.
mm,
Yeah.
mm, mm.
Yeah, it's interesting how that stuff arises when you're working with a teacher or a mentor or somebody. It's very mutual, very much growing out of the interaction as opposed to anything that I can a
Yeah.
big brick of wisdom I can drop on their foot or something.
Mm, 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 mm,
Yeah.
mm. Like if somebody came to me looking for the way, probably I would ask him, well, what exactly are you looking for? What is your question that brings you here? That was the question I asked people at Antaji. What brings you to Antaji? And sometimes people had a long story to tell, but
Mm.
for me, it was less about the story they had to tell, but the making them aware, well, something brought me here.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
often it's more important if you can't grasp it. I don't know why I'm here, but something brought me here. It
Yeah.
was a long way.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I need to take care of this question. It's less about the answers that we can give as teachers, but more that like in Rinzai you have the koans, but even in Soto, you come with your koan. Your koan is kind of guiding you to the monastery, otherwise you wouldn't go there.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the point is not to forget something brought me here. There's
Yeah.
something that I must solve here.
Right.
And that also
Yeah.
helps you in these periods where you start to drift. You're here, so
Yeah.
then it's good for nothing. Okay, I do another session and I do another session. And at one point, it's really good for nothing, but not in the sense that Sawaki Roshi says. You're just killing time. And then it's important to remind yourself, well, why am I here? What am I doing on the cushion?
That's a
I could have
really
fun.
good.
I could have fun with the girls on the beach, but I decided to be here. What am I doing here?
Hmm. Yeah, that's a really interesting
Hmm.
call.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
if you want to call it that, yeah, 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 yeah. I mean, I didn't have an answer to that question. Why am I here for many, many years? You
Mm,
don't really understand because, of course, when you
mm.
decide to go to a monastery, everyone asks you what you're going there for and what you hope to find. And
Yeah. Yeah.
the answers come from that young can-do
Mm, mm, mm,
adolescent ego, looking for truth or looking for an end to
mm, mm,
suffering or all
mm,
these
mm,
abstract answers. But that's a very deep question. What brings you to the cushion? That's a great thing to come to the cushion with.
mm, mm,
You don't need much more of a koan than that.
mm, mm,
And not even a koan, not that it has to be answered. It's almost like it's its own answer. And
mm, mm. Yeah.
yeah, that call is the answer to the, yeah,
Yeah, it's just about don't forget that.
yeah.
Don't at one point you don't hear the call anymore, and so it's important to remind yourself of that call to
Yeah, that's a good point. You
hear
become
the
like
call.
a career monk, and you
Mm,
go
mm,
in
mm.
and you just light the candles and you do the bows and you just sit and
Yeah.
and it's like,
Mm.
whoa, what is going on? I'm like the priest in a Rimbaud poem or a Baudelaire poem or something with the stinky shoes going through the motions. That's not what I signed on for.
Mm,
Yeah,
mm, 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 mm,
yeah. That's what I like
mm,
about the lay life is
mm,
not having to do that
mm,
anymore.
mm, mm.
Yeah.
One question that's not on the list, like I'm from the Soto tradition, you're from the Rinzai tradition, but when Zen came to the West, at first it was D.T. Suzuki, it was guys like Alan Watts or the Beatniks, and it was usually Rinzai.
Hmm.
And Kaplo isn't really Rinzai, it's a mixture, but it's the importance is on the koans, on
Yeah.
Satori. But for some reason, I have the feeling that today, both in Europe and America, Soto has become much stronger. Although, in a way, Soto is so much more boring. You just sit, you put on the ropes. While in Rinzai, you got the Dokusan, you got the one-on-one meeting with the teacher, you got the Mumonkan, the Hekigan Roku. How come? How come that Soto, in a way, has overtaken Rinzai in the
Yeah,
West?
it's a good question. I mean, and then you wonder, okay, and why has like the Jack Cornfield slash
Mm,
Sharon Salzberg, and I forget the name of the other
mm,
guy who I actually like a lot in the insight meditation tradition, like that
mm,
Theravadan practice. Why has that even overtaken Zen practice? Like
mm,
there
mm.
are certain styles
Yeah,
of
yeah.
Buddhism that have has really been more successful than others, and Rinzai has not been so successful. I mean, it's a good question. I think I don't know what the answer to that is. Part of it is you just have to say that a great teacher, Shunryo Suzuki, was in the absolute right
Mm,
place at the absolute right time and attracted a certain kind of student who then attracted a certain kind of student. And there was enough, maybe, wiggle room within the Soto lineage to where they can connect to Western students. There's this esoteric flavor around Rinzai Zen sometimes, having to do with koan practice, having to do with Satori, having to
mm,
do with enlightenment, having to do with passive koan that I think just turns a lot of people off. I mean, we were so
mm,
strict. We were so strict at, but we were so ridiculous at Mount Baldy, yelling at
mm,
people in Zen, you know, corrections, like mastering the inflection of a correction was the most important thing.
mm,
And
mm,
I think there's an element of that it's overly it's cosplaying samurai zen to some extent.
mm,
I
mm,
think
mm,
maybe arguably in the Soto tradition there's less of that. It's quote unquote farmer zen. So it's more
mm,
accessible maybe.
mm,
You know, less people can take it into their lives easier. But again, a lot
mm,
of it I think is just probably Shunryo Suzuki, and then his successors are so um, omnipresent, like in the Buddhist magazines and on the Buddhist bookshelves. They wrote good books. They have accessible teachings, and not so much in Rinzai Zen. I mean, there are almost no. Western respect. I shouldn't say this out loud, but it seems to me that, to the best of my knowledge, which is limited, there's not a ton of like acknowledged Rinzai Zen masters in the West who could do koans. And the ones who do take it really seriously and require a kind of commitment that I don't think most people can do, you know?
mm,
I mean, in
mm,
the Rinzai
mm,
lineage, there are no. Okay, here's the other thing. And I can only speak for my community. Like my teacher came here to the West, to America, Gardena, California, and I think it was the 50s. He taught up
mm,
until the mid 2000s, maybe the
mm,
late 2000s. I forget. He died in 2014, I think, and he was teaching right up until like 2010. So I mean, he taught for a long time and he never named a successor. So he never
yeah,
named
yeah,
a single person who could do koans. I actually Genro, who you would know because he started the
mm,
Bodhidharma
yeah,
Zen Center here in Vienna, he was
yeah,
allowed to do very beginners koans because Roshi at some point was too old to travel to Europe. But
yeah,
Genro was the only person that was allowed to do koan practice. So now you have this situation where I'm a priest. And that's as high as
mm,
we get in our organization. And I am not allowed to do koan practice or to give teishos, which is a certain level of Dharma talk.
mm,
So we were
mm,
never fully empowered to teach. And
mm,
there's always
mm,
that's problematic in spreading a lineage, you know.
mm,
And
mm,
nope,
mm,
and there are, like I said, there I can't name on one hand white or Western dudes or women who can do koan
mm,
practice legitimately from a Rinzai Zen
mm,
master. It's usually Japanese teachers coming over from Japan. And then, of course, there's the whole Korean lineage, but I'm not that fluent in that.
mm,
I'm not even, I know they do koans, but that's a different thing. So yeah, it's a very good question. It's a very good question.
mm, mm, mm,
Yeah.
mm. I had another maybe final question. I watched the interview with Hope that you
Oh yeah.
uploaded a short time ago, and in the end, Barry Matchett asked this question. I think he went into the direction that Zen can sometimes kind of push you into a dissociative state, I think he called it, and you asked him about it.
Yeah.
And he said that, for example, in Doksan, there's no opportunity to talk about your childhood traumata or about your personal problems.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not about you in a way.
Yeah.
Like that's one of when people ask me what did you learn from your teacher, I usually say the first thing that he told me when I came to Antaiji, he said you create Antaiji. And then a
Mm.
couple of years later, when I became a monk, he said it's not about you. These
Right.
were kind of the two pillars. And also with my teachers was never that we talked about my personal problems or about my childhood and stuff
Right.
like that.
Oh God.
So
Yeah.
that's true, but I wasn't really sure if that's a problem. For example, also in the positive sense, you never talk about your enlightenment experience you had during the last session. You don't go to the teacher and says, I
Yeah.
want to tell you about this great experience I had.
Right.
Um, I have the feeling that sometimes we're a little bit obsessed with talking about this thing I have, be it negative,
Absolutely.
be it positive. And I found it really refreshing in Zen that you don't talk about it. And
Absolutely.
for me, I never felt that the Japanese were kind of insensitive to people's feelings or the emotions, the states they are. Quite the opposite. Think that they had always their antenna out. They knew exactly where I was without talking about it. So when I listened to that question, I thought, well, probably that's the point of view of a psychoanalyst, of a psychiatrist. You need to talk about these things,
Yeah.
otherwise
Yeah.
you're missing out. But
Yeah.
I felt that's also, you talked about this overthinking, the
Yeah.
tendency of our mind. We need to analyze this childhood trauma, otherwise,
Right.
how can we ever be cured? But
Right.
sometimes the cure can be just let it go. And for example, when you live in Antaji, like one question would be, well, how are the chicken? How are the chicken? Or did you milk the goat? How
Right.
much milk was there?
Right.
How are the vegetables growing in the garden? And you might think, but I came here to solve my problem, but the
Right.
chicken, that's your problem.
Right.
That's
Right.
no one.
And then your
Yeah.
problem diminishes, right?
Mm,
Isn't that amazing? I mean, I don't know if I ever solved
mm,
any of my psychological problems. They
mm, mm,
diminished through
mm,
practice. You know,
mm,
Yeah, I mean, I am 100% with you on that.
Mm,
It
mm,
was
mm,
such a gift to
mm,
realize
mm,
not that I had to solve my problems, but that
mm,
they weren't even really problems. And if they were, they're not such a big deal. My mentor used to say, I would get so mad because I would be so angry and say, let it go. It's not. I get so mad. But then over the years, those things would be let go
mm,
of.
mm.
And,
Yeah.
but Barry specifically, I think, in that conversation was gently coming up on the question of how did you guys, meaning us guys, meaning my community, have this culture of sexual misconduct with my teacher, Joshu Suzaki Roshi. So I think that he may have explicitly
Mm,
asked that. That's where he was going with that. And I mean,
mm,
which is a different question, but I can say I get
mm,
like also I
mm,
did notice in myself, there's that whole term spiritual bypassing, which I'm not a big fan of, and yet I can't think of another term for it. Like I did see a lot of like I remember my
mm.
mentor telling me like there was one priest in specific who
Yeah.
was like the example of um how myself as a priest, I could never have any ego about my role or status because when I realized that if this guy can become a priest, anyone can become a priest. And I mean, I all due respect to him as a human being. He was just like a petulant, angry, uninsightful child, this
Mm,
person, right? And that's being
mm,
cruel, but it needs to be said. And my
mm,
mentor would say, like, how can you do this practice for so long and not change and still act like an asshole, you know? And there is something to the fact that that to what Barry was getting at. Like
mm,
it's true, it's not about yourself.
mm, mm,
It's true, but also, come on, like you can't keep carrying these. There is something that like you can get through a whole big hard retreat past some koans and
mm,
still be
mm, mm,
um, manifesting sexual misconduct, for example, or manifesting bullying behavior towards
mm,
fellow monks
mm,
and nuns and
mm,
that sort of thing. It's
mm,
like, no, something is up with that. And maybe there's
mm,
some place you're not allowing the practice to reach or that the practice doesn't reach. And I agree with
mm,
you. Like, I never got the sense from my teacher or the Japanese students, for the most part, that I knew, although there were not so many of them, but when we went to Japan, I met them, that they were cold or ignoring the emotional life or feeling or anything. There's more of a sense that there were cultural differences between the ways we
mm,
expressed
mm,
ourselves and that sort of thing.
mm,
But I can say, like, I manifested this behavior and my monk peers manifested this behavior, like behavior that you wouldn't expect from someone who had spent so much time practicing. So then there's
mm,
always that
mm,
question, well, if it's not making you a better person, what is it doing? And then of course the
mm,
monk always
mm.
says, oh, that's just your ego talking, But yeah, yeah. Yeah, that integration is like every person's individual koan. Um, yeah. And like you have to solve it yourself. And like if you're behaving like a jerk still, or you still have pain and anger from your childhood after many years of practice, like
Mm,
a
mm,
lot of times when I sit on the cushion, stuff will come up, but the practice isn't going to solve it. And a lot of times, like you got to solve it yourself. And if you don't, there are
mm,
consequences. You can become a bad monk, you know
mm,
and use the practice to become strong and avoid these things you got to look at, I think.
mm, 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 mm,
Thoughts.
mm.
Yeah.
When people want to practice with you, usually they reach out to you on Patreon. So if somebody becomes your kind of support on Patreon, they can also have interviews with you, or do you have also
I
online
don't
sitting?
I do some online sitting. I need to do more of it, and I'm going to do more of it. And
Yeah,
that's the extent of how I like to do my videos, and then I'm working
yeah.
on some writing projects, and then I talk to some people individually through Patreon. But mostly I'm not in that. that teaching role or even like a mentor role. I'm very much allergic to
Yeah.
that role now. But yeah, people can come over to Patreon and there's a community over there of just people who are trying to figure this stuff out together. Is more how I
Mm-mm.
would put it. Yeah.
Is that the way you support yourself, or do you have other
I have other
income?
things, but it's becoming prime. It's becoming it is very important piece
I
of
see, I see.
yeah. I live home.
Sometimes in your videos, I see kind of paintings, but those are not your
Oh no,
paintings.
those are my girlfriends. Yeah, she's a great
I
artist.
see,
Wish I could do
I
that.
see, I
Yeah.
see.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think in the interview with Hope, you said you were aspiring to become a writer in LA, but I think also somewhere it says you were a stand-up comedian.
Yeah, I did it all. I was writing screenplays in Los Angeles and I was
Yeah.
editing or not editing them. You sort of working with producers when I was at a
Mhm.
production company. And then, yeah, and then I did stand-up comedy for a while at night. And I sort of did a tiny bit of acting, very
Mhm.
unsuccessful. Yeah.
Yeah, but when I watch your videos, I can feel you take it serious. You kind of
I guess I
pretty
do.
professional.
Oh, interesting. I haven't heard that one yet, so that's interesting. Usually what I get is it's unprofessional.
Well, I mean, it's among the unprofessional guys like kind of Brad Warner or myself. You're, I think, the most professional
Oh,
among us.
interesting. I'll take that as a compliment, I think.
Yeah. It's not this kind of polished thing, polished professionality, but I can feel you take it serious,
Oh
and
yeah, well I have
there's
been
also some,
I,
yeah.
yeah, I have been doing more editing. I just find that to be fun, is
Mm.
putting music in and stuff and just cutting. I just can't resist sometimes putting in a sound cue or some kind of
Yeah.
humorous image. It's so amateurish, but it's like when I'm sitting there doing the video, it's just I got to make it interesting. So yeah.
There's at least half a brain in there, and a
Yeah.
lot of sincerity, of course. Sincerity and maybe also desperation.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. Maybe 40% of a brain. Yeah. Lots and 60% desperation. And I'm not sure where sincerity is. Yeah. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
accurate.
Mm. Mm. So I guess most of the viewers on my channel already know you and your channel of, but if there's anybody who's seeing Shozan, Jack Haubner for the first time, visit Zen Confidential. I will put a link in the
Cool.
description.
Thank you. Yeah.
Um, Read his books. I could imagine that you talked also about this stuff that happened in Mount Baldy and the whole thing. I think that's also a topic in your books.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I discuss all that. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. That was my in my last book, Single White Monk, which I need to do a third book that kind of is like, okay, coming through that, what's on the other side? So I
Mm,
actually have a bunch of essays on Patreon that eventually I'm going to fold into
mm, mm, mm.
it's like the post monastery book. But yeah, yeah, books and videos. It's basically what I'm doing these days.
Great, great. It was great to talk to you.
Yeah, I'm
To
glad we
talk
got to
to you.
do this. Thank you.
Mm,
Yeah, it
mm,
was great talking
mm,
to you.
mm, mm. I won't go to Vienna anytime soon, but next year I'm gonna be in Purek. You
Where's
know
that?
Purek?
No.
It's one of the places that Vanya Palmas founded, and he's a student of Kobun Chino.
So he's
You
where?
know Kobun.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Well, he's living in Switzerland, and
Okay.
there's a bigger place that's called Felsentor up in the mountains, very high up in the mountains.
I think people have talked
And
about.
Purek is also in the Alps.
Okay, yeah. Oh, that's
Um, in the Alps, so it's not too close from Vienna. Probably it's southwest of Scheips,
okay.
but a
Okay.
beautiful place. Beautiful
Yeah.
place.
I think I have a
Mm.
friend who might have gone there. Yeah, well, listen, if you make it to Vienna, we should get some
Yeah.
green tea or sake sometime.
I would love to. I would love to. Yeah. Yeah.
Good.
Who's in charge of the Bodhidharma Sendo now?
Keegan Eckerson, a friend of mine and a guy that I
Oh,
trained with in Mount Baldy. Keegan Eckerson is the abbot there now. Yeah. And
he's an American.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, I think he was the Inji, the first session I translated in 1990 or so.
He would not have been there? Would he have been there in 1990? I don't know if he was there in 1990, maybe.
Or maybe it was a guy called
You know what?
Kido. It was something
Oh, yeah,
with
yeah.
Ki.
Yeah, K. Maybe it was, you know what? Maybe it was Keegan. Keegan or Keto or Koshin. There were a lot of K's, yeah. Or Koyo or
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So he is the abbot there. And then he's now training with Shoto Harada Roshi, who's actually going to be doing that. They just got they built an addition to their training center in the mountains in the Alps, in the it's called the Berg Zendo, the Mountain Zendo, and it's in
Oh,
Hooivand. It's an old Gasthaus, and they transformed this area into a bigger Zendo. So Shota Harada is going to come and he's going to do an opening ceremony there in a month or so. So yeah, Keegan is the abbot and he's working with Shota Harada now, but they're independent from the One Drop community.
I see. Interesting. Interesting.
Yeah. It's like insider Rinzai baseball here.
Yeah. Thank you for your time,
Thank you.
and thank you to everybody who has been watching.
Yeah, thank you.
Um, Visit Zen Confidential, and maybe there's a chance to see each other in real life.
Yeah, absolutely. That'd be great. Yeah, thank you. Ciao.
Okay. Thank you.
Tschüss.
Tschüss.